The satellite images don't lie. Right now, at this very moment, an Iranian drone is circling above the Arabian Sea, its transponder flickering on and off like a ghost playing hide and seek with American radar systems. Below it, cutting through the dark waters, the USS Abraham Lincoln, one of America's most powerful aircraft carriers, bristles with enough firepower to level a small country. The drone's signal, designated SEPU-2501, appears, disappears, then reappears again. It's watching. It's waiting. And 8,000 miles away, in the halls of the Kremlin and the corridors of Beijing, Russian and Chinese military commanders are coordinating their next moves with Tehran in what may be the most significant military alignment against the United States since the Cold War ended. This isn't a movie plot. This isn't speculation. This is happening right now, today, as you listen to these words. And what makes this moment so critical, so potentially explosive, is that most people have absolutely no idea how close we are to a confrontation that could reshape global power forever. So let me take you inside what's really happening in the waters off Iran, in the meeting rooms where Russian and Chinese defense ministers are planning joint operations, and on the deck of that Iranian drone carrier that just deployed to counter the American armada heading toward the Persian Gulf. Before we go further, I need to be clear about something. What you're seeing here is only the public layer of this story. For channel members, I break down what happens next, the timelines decision makers are actually working with, and the scenarios that won't be discussed openly. If you want access to that deeper analysis, you can join the channel by clicking the Join button below. January 27th, 2026, a seemingly ordinary Monday morning in the northern Arabian Sea. But flight tracking data reveals something extraordinary. An Iranian drone, flying at 12,574 feet, suddenly pops up on commercial flight radar. For a brief window, anyone with access to Flight Radar 24 can see it. Then, just as quickly, the signal vanishes. This isn't a malfunction. This is deliberate. The Iranians are sending a message, and that message is clear. We can see you, we are watching you, and we can disappear whenever we want. Before we go further, I need to be clear about something. What you're seeing here is only the public layer of this story. For channel members, I break down what happens next, the timelines decision makers are actually working with, and the scenarios that won't be discussed openly. If you want access to that deeper analysis, you can join the channel by clicking the Join button below. The next day, January 28th, the same drone appears again, this time flying lower at about 8,000 feet. It stays visible from 12:08 in the afternoon UTC until 1:33, then disappears once more. Intelligence analysts tracking these movements know exactly what this represents. It's reconnaissance, it's surveillance. And it's happening in the exact same airspace where American military aircraft are operating in support of the Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. Now, you might be wondering, why does one drone matter? America has the most advanced military in the world. We have aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, cruise missiles, and technology that Iran couldn't dream of matching. And you'd be absolutely right about America's technological superiority. But here's what changes everything. Iran doesn't need to match American technology. They just need to overwhelm it with numbers. And that's exactly what defense experts are now warning could happen. Cameron Chell, the CEO of Dragonfly, one of Canada's leading drone manufacturers, put it bluntly when he spoke to Fox News. Iran's drone capabilities are worth tens of millions of dollars, he said. But it's not about sophistication, it's about volume. By pairing low-cost warheads with inexpensive delivery platforms, essentially remotely piloted aircraft, Iran has developed an effective asymmetric threat against highly sophisticated military systems. Think about what he's really saying here. If Iran launches hundreds of drones in a short period of time, some are almost certain to get through. Modern defense systems, as advanced as they are, were not originally designed to counter that kind of saturation attack. Imagine you're standing on the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's a floating city, home to thousands of sailors and Marines, equipped with some of the most advanced defensive systems ever created. You've got radar systems that can track a baseball from 100 miles away. You've got interceptor missiles that can shoot down incoming threats. You've got close-in weapon systems, essentially rapid-fire cannons that can engage targets at the last second. But now imagine facing not one threat, not 10 threats, but hundreds of cheap drones, all arriving at nearly the same moment from different directions. Each interceptor missile you fire costs hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. Each Iranian drone costs maybe $35,000. The mathematics of this kind of warfare are terrifying for a navy built around expensive, high-value assets. And Iran knows this. That's why they just deployed something that should have everyone's attention. The Shahid Bagheri, Iran's first dedicated naval drone carrier. Iranian state media showed footage of this massive vessel, a converted 42,000-ton container ship that's been transformed into a floating drone base. It's over 240 meters long, with a flight deck featuring an inclined jump platform similar to what you'd see on an aircraft carrier. But instead of fighter jets, this ship carries drones, 60 of them. plus 30 fast missile-launching vessels stored in its lower decks. The ship was positioned just 5 kilometers south of Bandar Abbas port on January 27th, right as the USS Abraham Lincoln was approaching the region. The timing is no coincidence. The Iranians are demonstrating capability and resolve. They're saying, you bring your carrier, we'll bring our drones. You bring your advanced technology, we'll bring our numbers. And here's the thing that should worry American military planners. The Shahid Bagheri can operate continuously for a year without refueling. It has a range of approximately 22,000 nautical miles. This isn't a coastal defense vessel. This is a ship designed to project power across oceans. But the Iranian drone threat is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Because while that drone was circling above American ships, and while Iran was positioning its drone carrier in the Persian Gulf, something else was happening that reveals the true scope of what we're dealing with. Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belousov was on a video call with his Chinese counterpart, Dong Jun. And what they discussed should send chills down the spine of anyone paying attention to global security. January 27th, 2026, the same day that Iranian drone appeared over the Arabian Sea, Belousov told his Chinese counterpart that the developments in Venezuela and Iran require their departments to conduct constant analysis of the situation in the security sphere and take corresponding actions. Let that sink in for a moment. The Russian defense minister is publicly stating that Russia and China are coordinating their responses to events in Iran. He's not hiding it. He's not being subtle. He's announcing to the world that Moscow and Beijing are working together, analyzing the situation together, and planning to act together. According to the official Russian Defense Ministry statement, Belousov said the two sides have already taken steps to strengthen ties, deepen cooperation in joint operations and personnel training, enhance strategic coordination, and protect their shared interests. This isn't diplomatic language. This is military alliance language. And when you connect the dots between what Russia and China are saying and what they are actually doing, the picture becomes crystal clear. Because it's not just talk. Chinese and Russian warships have been conducting joint exercises with Iran. In March 2025, Russian and Chinese naval vessels arrived at Iran's Chabahar port for a drill called Security Belt 2025. China sent its guided missile destroyer Bao-2 along with several other vessels, including 2 shipborne helicopters. Russia deployed vessels from its Pacific Fleet, which had recently conducted artillery drills in the eastern Indian Ocean. These weren't symbolic exercises. These were serious military drills designed to enhance coordination between 3 navies that, until recently, had never operated together at this level. And there's more. Iran, Russia, and China are planning another joint naval exercise called Maritime Security Belt for late February 2026 in the northern Indian Ocean. This drill will involve the Iranian Navy, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, and naval forces from both China and Russia. The timing is critical. These exercises are happening as Iran faces massive domestic protests that have killed thousands of people, as the United States has positioned at least 10 warships in the Middle East, and as President Trump has threatened military strikes against Iranian targets. Now, you might be asking yourself, are Chinese or Russian troops actually in Iran right now? And this is where we need to be very precise and very honest about what the evidence shows. There are no confirmed reports of Chinese or Russian ground troops deployed inside Iranian territory. None. 0. Anyone telling you that Russian or Chinese soldiers are marching through Tehran is either misinformed or deliberately spreading false information. But here's what is happening, and it's arguably more significant than boots on the ground. Russia and China are providing Iran with something far more valuable than troops. They're providing strategic coordination, military technology, intelligence sharing, and diplomatic cover. Russia has previously sent Iran Spartak armored vehicles. Iranian border guards started operating these Russian vehicles in November 2025. These aren't troops, but they are force multipliers that help Iran's security apparatus deal with both protests and insurgent activity along its borders. Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu held a phone call with Iran's National Security Council Secretary Ali Larijani on January 13th, almost certainly to discuss the ongoing protests. Iran had previously sought Russia's help to quell protests back in 2022, and the pattern appears to be repeating. The Chinese involvement is more subtle but equally significant. China signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Iran, and while they haven't deployed troops, they've been deeply involved in joint military exercises, technology transfers, and economic support that helps Iran weather international sanctions. The Chinese Ministry of Defense emphasized that these naval exercises are designed to enhance military coordination between the 3 navies. That's not humanitarian cooperation, that's military alliance building. And this military coordination was on full display in early January 2026, when Chinese, Russian, and Iranian warships gathered off the coast of South Africa for a week-long exercise called Will for Peace 2026. This drill brought together navies from the BRICS Plus countries. The naval exercises ran from January 9th through 16th at Simonstown Naval Base in South Africa. Chinese vessels included the Type 052 guided missile destroyer Tangshan and the Type 903 replenishment ship Taihu. Russia sent the Staragushchi-class corvette Stoiky with a helicopter on board, along with its escorting oiler Yelnya. Iran initially planned to send vessels, but under intense American pressure, they were reportedly asked to accept only observer status rather than active participation. Why does this matter? Because these aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern of increasing military cooperation between three nations that all have serious conflicts with the United States. Russia is fighting a proxy war against America in Ukraine. China is preparing for a potential confrontation over Taiwan, and Iran has been in a state of hostility with the United States since 1979. Now they're coordinating their naval operations, sharing intelligence, conducting joint exercises, and presenting a unified front against American military power. President Trump, when asked about these joint exercises and the show of force by these three American adversaries, said he's not at all concerned. "We're stronger than all of them," he told Fox News aboard Air Force One. "We have more power than all of them." And in terms of raw military capability, he's absolutely correct. The United States Navy alone has more firepower than the combined navies of Russia, China, and Iran. America has 11 aircraft carriers. China has 3. Russia has 1. Iran has 0, unless you count their converted drone carrier. American military technology is generations ahead in most categories. But military power isn't just about who has the biggest guns. It's about will, it's about geography, it's about cost effectiveness, and it's about what you're willing to risk. And this is where the situation gets genuinely dangerous. Iran is fighting on its doorstep. For them, the Persian Gulf isn't some distant theater of operations. It's their backyard. They've spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. A confrontation with American naval power in waters they know intimately. They've built shore-based missiles. They've deployed fast attack boats. They've created a network of proxy forces throughout the region. And now they've added swarms of cheap drones to the mix. The economics of this confrontation favor Iran in a perverse way. Every American interceptor missile costs anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. Every Iranian drone costs $35,000 or less. If Iran launches 100 drones at an American destroyer, and that destroyer successfully shoots down 99 of them, Iran still wins if that one remaining drone gets through. The cost exchange ratio is completely in Iran's favor. They can afford to lose 99 drones. Can America afford to lose a $3 billion destroyer? And here's where it gets even more complicated. The United States has actually reverse-engineered Iran's most successful drone, the Shahed 136, and created an American version called Lucas, which stands for Low-Cost Uncrewed Combat Attack System. On December 16, 2025, the USS Santa Barbara launched a Lucas drone from its flight deck in the Persian Gulf. And this American version of Iran's kamikaze drone costs approximately $35,000 per airframe, the same price point as Iran's original. The Pentagon has stood up a specialized drone squadron called Task Force Scorpion Strike to deploy these weapons. Think about what this represents. The United States military, with all its advanced technology and massive budget, has concluded that the Iranian approach to drone warfare is so effective that we need to copy it. We're not just building defenses against Iranian drones. We're building our own Iranian-style drones. This is an implicit admission that Iran has figured out something important about modern warfare. Cheap, expendable, mass-produced drones can challenge even the most sophisticated military in the world. But back to the immediate situation. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is operating in the northern Arabian Sea. 3 accompanying warships are with it. This isn't a routine deployment. This is a message to Iran, a show of force designed to deter Iranian aggression and support potential military operations if President Trump decides to strike Iranian targets. The Washington Post reported that the carrier and its escorts arrived in the northern Arabian Sea in late January, putting them within striking distance of Iran. And the military buildup is extensive. At least 10 American warships are currently positioned in the Middle East. The USS Delbert D. Black was tracked passing through the Suez Canal heading toward the Gulf. U.S. Navy surveillance drones, including an MQ-4C, are flying missions over the Gulf near Iran's coast, taking off from bases in Abu Dhabi. A P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft has been conducting surveillance flights in the region. American bombers have been staging from Diego Garcia. Heavy transport aircraft have been flowing into Gulf bases. This is the largest American military buildup in the region in years. President Trump has called it a beautiful armada sailing toward Iran. He's stated that a lot of ships are heading to Iran and expressed hope they won't be needed. But his administration has made clear that military strikes are absolutely on the table if diplomatic pressure does not achieve results. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt warned that while Trump would prefer diplomacy, airstrikes remain an option. Senator Lindsey Graham has been even more explicit, urging strikes on Iranian oil refineries if American forces or allies are hit, arguing for taking Iran out of the oil business to change the regime's calculus. The trigger for all this military maneuvering is the massive protest movement that erupted in Iran on December 28, 2025. What started at Tehran as grand bazaar over currency devaluation and economic hardship has exploded into the largest uprising Iran has seen since the Islamic Revolution of 1979. An Iranian official told Reuters that about 2,000 people have been killed in the unrest, though that number is almost certainly a severe undercount. The human rights activist news agency reported that casualty figures had reached 5,459 as of mid-January, with over 17,000 cases still under investigation. Some media reports and human rights organizations suggest the actual death toll could be as high as 30,000 or even 35,000 people. The Iranian regime has responded with overwhelming force. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has ordered security forces to do whatever it takes to crush the protests. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps ground forces have been deployed to cities across Iran. Iranian authorities have blamed the United States and Israel for backing what they call armed rioters. President Trump has threatened to hit Iran hard if protesters continue to be killed, creating a dangerous dynamic where domestic unrest in Iran could trigger international military intervention. And this is where the Russian and Chinese coordination becomes critically important. Because if the United States strikes Iran, what will Russia and China do? Will they provide Iran with advanced air defense systems? Will they share real-time satellite intelligence about American military movements? Will they increase their naval presence in the region? Will they use their United Nations Security Council vetoes to protect Iran from international consequences? These aren't theoretical questions. These are live issues that military planners in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran are gaming out right now. The recent American operation in Venezuela provides a disturbing template for what could happen in Iran. On January 3, 2026, U.S. Special Operations Forces conducted a raid on Caracas that resulted in the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. The operation, called Absolute Resolve, involved helicopters, fighter jets, bombers, cyber operations, electronic warfare, and precision targeting. Social media filled with videos of explosions in Caracas and large fireballs in the night sky as air defenses tried to respond. The operation exposed the limits of Russian and Chinese military hardware that Venezuela had acquired over the years. Russian air defense systems, Chinese radars, and Iranian drones all failed to prevent the American strike package from achieving its objectives. Iranian military planners are certainly studying the Venezuela operation very carefully. What worked for the Americans? What failed for Venezuela's defenders? How can Iran avoid the same fate? And the answer they seem to have arrived at is, don't rely solely on conventional air defenses. Instead, create multiple layers of asymmetric threats, shore-based missiles, fast attack boats, proxy forces throughout the region, and most importantly, swarms of cheap drones that can be launched in numbers large enough to overwhelm even the most sophisticated defenses. Iran has also been positioning its assets very deliberately. Iranian state media showed footage of spy drones flying over the Persian Gulf with the warning, "Whatever you sow, you will reap." Iranian-aligned groups in Iraq and Yemen have threatened severe and painful blows against Israel and the United States if Iran is targeted. These aren't empty threats. Iranian proxy forces have demonstrated their capability to strike American bases in Israeli territory. The threat is real, and American commanders know it. Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, has acknowledged that American bases in the region remain vulnerable to Iran's missile capabilities. This is a significant admission from a senior military officer. Despite all of America's defensive systems, despite all our technology, our bases in the Middle East are within range of Iranian missiles and could be hit if Iran decides to strike. But some analysts believe the American military buildup is more about diplomatic pressure than actual preparation for war. The Jerusalem Post has suggested that the deployment of U.S. forces in the Middle East is likely intended to increase diplomatic and economic pressure on Iran, rather than signal an imminent military strike, to stop supporting proxy forces, and to ease its crackdown on protesters. There may be some truth to this analysis. After all, Trump has said publicly that he's received private messages from the Iranian regime that are quite different from their public statements, and that he has an interest in exploring those messages. This suggests some form of back-channel communication is happening even as both sides engage in military posturing. But the problem with brinksmanship is that it only works if everyone involved is rational, if everyone correctly interprets signals, and if no one makes a catastrophic miscalculation. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. You have American warships operating in close proximity to Iranian drones and naval forces. You have Iran facing the worst domestic unrest in its history, with a regime that feels cornered and desperate. You have Russia and China coordinating their responses and looking for ways to challenge American power without triggering direct confrontation. You have the American president who has shown a willingness to use military force aggressively, as demonstrated in Venezuela. And you have military systems on all sides that could be triggered by accident, by miscommunication, or by deliberate provocation. One Iranian drone flying too close to an American ship, one nervous radar operator making a split-second decision, one missile launched in what's perceived as self-defense. Any of these could cascade into a broader confrontation that no one actually wants, but that becomes impossible to stop once it starts. And if shooting starts between American and Iranian forces, what will Russia and China do? Will they stand on the sidelines? Will they provide covert support to Iran? Will they see an opportunity to challenge American military dominance while U.S. forces are committed in the Middle East? These questions don't have clear answers, and that uncertainty is itself destabilizing. What we do know is that the level of military coordination between Russia, China, and Iran has reached a point that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Russian and Chinese defense ministers are holding regular consultations specifically about Iran. Their navies are conducting joint exercises. They're sharing military technology. They're coordinating their diplomatic positions at the United Nations. They're building the infrastructure of a military alliance, even if they're not calling it that. And from their perspective, this makes perfect strategic sense. All three countries see the United States as their primary strategic competitor or adversary. Russia is already in a confrontation with America over Ukraine. China is preparing for a potential confrontation over Taiwan. Iran has been targeted by American sanctions and military threats for decades. By coordinating their efforts, by presenting a united front, by forcing America to worry about multiple theaters simultaneously, they increase their leverage and reduce America's freedom of action. The will for peace. 2026 naval exercise off South Africa wasn't just about practicing maritime operations. It was about demonstrating to the world that Russia, China, and Iran can operate together, that they can project naval power into distant waters, and that they represent an alternative power bloc to American-led alliances. Even though Iran ultimately accepted only observer status due to American pressure, the fact that their warships sailed to South Africa alongside Russian and Chinese vessels sent a powerful message. South Africa's decision to host these exercises, despite criticism from the Democratic Alliance Party, shows how the global balance is shifting. Countries are increasingly willing to engage with Russia, China, and Iran, even in the face of American disapproval. The South African Deputy Defense Minister, Bantu Holomisa, said explicitly, "Let us not press panic buttons because the USA has got a problem with countries. Those are not our enemies." This is a blunt rejection of American attempts to isolate these nations internationally. And the economic dimension matters enormously. Trade between Russia and China reached about $220 billion last year. China signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Iran that includes massive investments in Iranian infrastructure and energy sectors. These aren't just military alliances. These are deep economic relationships that give all three countries incentives to support each other against American pressure. It was a tacit admission that economic warfare might be more effective than military threats. But it's also an acknowledgement that many countries are willing to risk American economic retaliation to maintain their relationships with Iran. So where does all this leave us? Right now, in early February 2026, we're in a moment of maximum tension and maximum uncertainty. American and Iranian forces are operating in close proximity in the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea. Iran is deploying its drone carrier and conducting reconnaissance flights over American ships. Russia and China are coordinating with Iran and planning joint naval exercises. Massive protests continue inside Iran, with thousands dead and the regime responding with brutal force. American military assets continue to flow into the region, and leaders on all sides are using increasingly aggressive rhetoric. The surveillance drone that keeps appearing and disappearing over the Arabian Sea is more than just a reconnaissance platform. It's a symbol of the new reality of great power competition. It's a reminder that technology has democratized certain forms of military power, allowing countries like Iran to challenge American naval dominance in ways that weren't possible a generation ago. It's a demonstration of how Russia and China are supporting their partner even without deploying troops to Iranian soil. And it's a warning that the next major conflict might not start with armies crossing borders, but with swarms of drones overwhelming defenses, with cyber attacks disabling critical systems, with proxy forces striking vulnerable targets, and with miscalculations spiraling into confrontations that no one can control. The fact that you probably hadn't heard about most of this until now should be deeply concerning. While the world's attention has been focused on other issues, a fundamental shift in global military alignments has been taking place. Russia, China, and Iran aren't just talking about cooperation. They're doing it. They're exercising together, planning together, coordinating their responses to American pressure together. And the United States is responding with the largest military buildup in the Middle East in years, with aggressive economic sanctions, with threats of military strikes, and with its own drone warfare capabilities that copy Iranian designs. No one knows how this ends. Will Trump's pressure campaign force Iran to negotiate? Will the Iranian regime collapse under the weight of domestic protests? Will Russia and China decide that supporting Iran isn't worth the cost? Will some incident trigger a military confrontation that escalates beyond anyone's control? All of these outcomes are possible. None of them are certain. What is certain is that the world is watching a high-stakes game of chicken between nuclear-armed powers with fundamentally different visions of how the world should be ordered. And somewhere over the Arabian Sea, an Iranian drone continues its surveillance, watching, waiting, sending its signal back to commanders who are making decisions that could reshape the global order. The next few weeks and months will reveal whether this crisis can be resolved diplomatically, or whether we're heading toward a military confrontation that could draw in multiple major powers and destabilize the entire Middle East. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error couldn't be smaller.